Blake Thompson sat in the corner of the Phillips Academy Library, staring at the red F marked across his calculus exam. His hands trembled as he placed the test paper on the growing pile of failures. 5 consecutive F grades in 6 weeks. Around him, other students packed their bags and chatted about weekend plans, but Blake could not move. He felt frozen in his chair, weighted down by shame and desperation. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the historic Boston prep school, but Blake saw no beauty in it. He saw only another day wasted, another opportunity lost, another disappointed look from his father waiting at home. Richard Thompson, billionaire founder of Thompson Technologies, expected excellence. Blake had been giving him failure. Blake picked up the test and studied the problems again. He had studied for hours with Mr. Bennett, his expensive private tutor. He had memorized formulas, practiced problems, and reviewed notes until midnight every night. But when he sat down to take the test, everything vanished from his mind like smoke. The numbers and symbols became meaningless scratches on paper. His brain refused to cooperate, no matter how hard he tried. What was wrong with him? Other students seemed to absorb information effortlessly. They participated in class discussions while Blake sat silent, afraid to reveal how little he understood. They completed homework in study hall while Blake struggled for hours at home, often giving up in frustration. They talked about college applications and future plans, while Blake wondered if he would even graduate. He thought about his father's face that morning at breakfast. Richard had asked about the upcoming calculus test, and Blake had lied, saying he felt prepared. The disappointment in his father's eyes when Blake brought home another F would be crushing. Richard never yelled or punished. He just grew quiet, his jaw tight, and Blake knew he was thinking about what a failure his son had become. Blake had every advantage money could buy. Private school tuition cost more than most people's annual salary. Mr. Bennett charged $300 per hour for tutoring sessions. Blake had his own study in the family's Beacon Hill mansion, equipped with every learning tool available. He had no excuse for failing except his own inadequacy. He pulled out his phone and looked at the message his father had sent earlier. "How did the test go, son? Proud of you for working so hard." Blake's throat tightened. He could not type a response. What could he say? That all the hard work meant nothing? That his brain simply refused to function properly? That maybe he should drop out and save everyone the embarrassment? The library grew quieter as more students left. Blake remained in his corner, hidden behind tall bookshelves. He did not want to go home. He did not want to face his father or show him another failing grade. He did not want to sit through another tutoring session with Mr. Bennett, who was growing increasingly impatient with Blake's inability to grasp concepts. Maybe he was just stupid. Maybe all the money and resources in the world could not fix whatever was broken in his brain. The thought made his chest ache. He had always tried his best, but his best was never good enough. Blake heard footsteps approaching and quickly wiped his eyes. He looked up to see Grace Hayes standing at the end of his table, holding her mother's work bag. Grace was his age, 17, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Her mother Patricia cleaned the Thompson mansion and had worked for the family for 10 years. Blake had seen Grace occasionally when she came to pick up her mother, but they had never really talked. Grace's expression softened as she noticed the failing test on the table. She did not look at Blake with pity or judgment, just concern. She set down the bag and took a step closer. "I am sorry to interrupt," Grace said quietly. "I was waiting for my mom, and I saw you through the window. You looked upset. Are you okay?" Blake wanted to say yes, wanted to pretend everything was fine, but the kindness in her voice broke something loose inside him. A tear rolled down his cheek before he could stop it. He quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. "I am failing everything," Blake said, his voice rough. "I study constantly, but nothing sticks. I feel like I am losing my mind. My dad has spent thousands on tutors, and I keep letting him down. I do not know what is wrong with me." Grace pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. She did not speak right away, just let him collect himself. When she did speak, her words were soft and thoughtful. "There's nothing wrong with you," Grace said. "Some people just learn differently. It took me years to figure that out about myself." Blake looked at her, confused. Grace was near the top of her class at Boston Public High School. He had heard his mother mention it to Patricia once, praising Grace's achievements. I used to fail tests too, Grace continued. My teachers thought I was not trying hard enough. But I was trying so hard I made myself sick with stress. Then I discovered something that changed everything. Would you like me to show you? Blake stared at her. This girl, whose mother cleaned his house, was offering to help him when expensive experts had given up. The offer should have felt insulting or embarrassing, but instead it felt like the first ray of hope he had felt in months. Why would you help me? Blake asked. You do not even know me. Grace smiled. Because someone showed me kindness when I needed it most. And because nobody deserves to feel the way you are feeling right now. Learning should not make you hate yourself. Blake felt something shift inside him. For weeks he had been drowning, and here was someone throwing him a rope. He could grab it or let himself sink further. Pride told him to refuse, to hide his struggles from yet another person. But desperation and a tiny spark of hope told him to accept. Yes, Blake said, his voice stronger now. Please. I will try anything. Grace's smile widened. Good. Can you meet me tomorrow after your classes? I will bring some things that might help. Blake nodded, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. As Grace stood to leave, Blake called after her. Grace? Thank you. Really? She turned back, her expression warm. Save your thanks. Let us see if this works first. But I believe it will. You are not broken, Blake. You just have not found your way yet. After Grace left, Blake sat alone in the library for a few more minutes. The failing test still lay on the table, but it felt less heavy now. Someone believed in him. Someone thought he could succeed. Maybe that was enough to start. Before we continue, I have a question for you. Have you ever felt like giving up, only to have someone unexpected show you kindness that changed everything? Drop a comment below sharing your story, and please subscribe to hear more heartwarming tales of hope and transformation. Blake arrived home that evening with the failing test still in his backpack. He walked through the front door of the Thompson mansion, its marble floors gleaming under the chandelier light. His father was in his study, and Blake could hear him on a phone call about business. Blake quietly climbed the curved staircase to his room, relieved to have a few hours before dinner to gather his thoughts. His bedroom was large and comfortable, decorated in shades of blue and gray. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Boston Common, where people walked dogs and jogged along paths. Blake tossed his backpack on his desk and sat on his bed, thinking about Grace's offer. Part of him felt embarrassed. How would it look if word got out that the billionaire's son needed help from the housekeeper's daughter? His classmates already whispered about him, wondering how someone with every advantage could fail so spectacularly. Mr. Bennett had made subtle comments about Blake lacking discipline or focus, implying the problem was effort rather than ability. But another part of Blake felt hopeful for the first time in months. Grace had not looked at him with judgment or pity. She had not made him feel stupid or lazy. She had simply offered help as one person to another, with genuine kindness in her eyes. That kindness felt more valuable than anything money could buy. Blake heard a soft knock on his door. His father entered, still dressed in his business suit, his expression concerned. Your mother said you went straight upstairs, Richard said. Rough day. Blake hesitated, then pulled the calculus test from his backpack and handed it to his father. He watched Richard's face as he looked at the red F. His father's jaw tightened, but his eyes remained sad rather than angry. Son, I do not understand, Richard said quietly. Mr. Bennett said you have been working hard in your tutoring sessions. What happened? I do not know, Dad, Blake said, his voice thick. I studied everything. I memorized all the formulas. But when I sat down to take the test, it all disappeared. I could not remember anything. It was like my brain shut down. Richard sat on the edge of the bed, setting the test aside. Maybe we need to find a different tutor. Someone with better techniques. Maybe the problem is me, Blake said. Maybe I am just not smart enough for this school. Do not say that, Richard said firmly. You are intelligent, Blake. We will figure this out. I will hire the best educational specialists in Boston if needed. Whatever it takes. Blake thought about Grace's offer. He knew his father would not understand why he wanted help from someone outside their social circle. But something told Blake that Grace's method might work where expensive specialists had failed. "Dad, can I try something first?" Blake asked. "Before we hire more people." Richard looked at him curiously. "What do you have in mind?" "I met someone today who struggled with the same problems. She figured out a different way to learn. She offered to show me her techniques." "Who is this person?" "Grace Hayes, Patricia's daughter." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly, but to Blake's surprise, his father did not dismiss the idea. Instead, he looked thoughtful. "Patricia's daughter," Richard repeated. "I have heard she does very well in school. Your mother mentions it sometimes." "Grace said there is nothing wrong with me, just that I learn differently," Blake explained. "She said she used to fail tests too, until she found her way. I want to try her method." Richard was quiet for a long moment. Blake expected him to say no, to insist on professional help instead. But his father surprised him. "If you think it will help, then yes," Richard said. "Try it. Grace is welcome here anytime. And Blake, I am proud of you for accepting help. That takes courage." Blake felt a wave of relief. "Thanks, Dad." After his father left, Blake texted Grace using the number she had given him at the library. "My dad said yes. When can we start?" Grace replied within minutes. "Tomorrow after your classes? I get out at 3. I can be at your place by 4. "That works. Thank you again. See you tomorrow. Bring your textbooks and any notes you have." That night at dinner, Blake's mother Jennifer asked about his day. Blake told her about Grace's offer to help. Jennifer smiled warmly. "Grace is a lovely girl," Jennifer said. "Patricia talks about her constantly. She got straight A grades last semester while working part-time at a bookstore. That is impressive dedication." The next afternoon, Blake raced home from school, arriving before Grace. He set up his study with all his textbooks, notebooks, and class materials. The room had a large desk, comfortable chairs, and good lighting. When the doorbell rang at 4 o'clock, Blake ran downstairs to answer it himself. Grace stood on the front step wearing jeans and a bright green sweater, carrying a canvas bag. She smiled when she saw him. "Ready to try something new?" she asked. "More than ready," Blake said. He led her upstairs to his study. Grace looked around the room, taking in all the expensive equipment and resources. "You have everything here," she said. "But sometimes having too many resources can be overwhelming. Let me show you what worked for me." She pulled items from her bag: colorful index cards, markers, a small voice recorder, and a rubber stress ball. Blake looked at the simple tools, confused. "This is what helped you?" he asked, trying not to sound doubtful. Grace laughed gently. "I know it looks basic, but here is what I learned. There are different types of learners. Some people learn by reading, some by listening, some by doing. I spent years trying to learn like everyone else, by reading textbooks and taking notes. But my brain needs different input." She held up the index cards. "I learn by seeing information in color and pictures, by moving while I study, by hearing information repeated in different ways. These simple tools help me figure out my learning style." Blake felt skeptical but willing. He had nothing to lose. "How do we start?" he asked. "First, tell me about your calculus class. What topic are you studying now?" "Derivatives," Blake said. "I do not understand them at all." Grace smiled. "Good. Let us start there. But we are going to learn about derivatives in a completely different way than your textbook teaches. Trust me." Blake looked at her confident expression and felt something he had not felt in months: genuine hope. Here was someone who understood what it felt like to struggle, who had found a way through, and who was willing to share that way with him out of pure kindness. "I trust you," Blake said. Grace's smile widened. "Then let us get started. By the end of tonight, derivatives are going to make sense. I promise." Grace cleared a space on Blake's desk and arranged the colorful index cards in front of him. She picked up a bright blue marker and handed Blake a red one. "First rule," Grace said. "No more black pens or pencils for studying. Color helps your brain remember. Different colors for different types of information." Blake took the red marker, feeling strange holding something so bright and playful in his serious study. "Now, explain derivatives to me the way your textbook teaches it," Grace said. Blake opened his calculus book and read the formal definition. A derivative is the rate of change of a function with respect to a variable. He looked up at Grace. I have memorized that, but I do not understand what it means. Exactly, Grace said. You are memorizing words without connecting them to meaning. Your brain is not a filing cabinet for facts. It is a connection machine. We need to create connections. Close your textbook. Blake closed the book, surprised. Now, stand up, Grace said. Stand up. Yes. Movement helps learning. Trust me. Blake stood. Grace stood too and walked to the other side of the room. Walk toward me slowly, she instructed. Blake walked slowly across the room, feeling silly but going along with it. You just move from one point to another, Grace said. How fast did you move? I do not know. Maybe 2 feet per second. Right. That is your rate of change. You change your position, and we can measure how fast you changed it. That is all a derivative is. It measures how fast something is changing. Something clicked in Blake's brain. He had walked across a room hundreds of times, but he had never connected that simple movement to the abstract concept in his textbook. So when the book talks about the rate of change of a function, Blake said slowly, it just means how fast the function is moving. Exactly, Grace said, grinning. See? You understand derivatives. You just needed to connect the abstract idea to something real. They spent the next hour applying this method to different concepts. Grace had Blake physically act out mathematical ideas. When they studied slopes, Blake walked up and down stairs, feeling how steep or gentle they were. When they studied acceleration, Blake pushed his rolling desk chair at different speeds. Each abstract concept became connected to physical experience. Grace also taught Blake to use the voice recorder. She had him explain concepts out loud in his own words, then play the recordings back while he walked around or squeezed the stress ball. She showed him how to draw pictures and diagrams on the index cards, using different colors for different parts of problems. Your brain needs multiple inputs, Grace explained. Reading alone does not work for you. But when you see colors, move your body, hear your own voice, and feel objects in your hands, you create multiple pathways to the same information. If one pathway gets blocked during a test, you have others to access. Blake practiced solving derivative problems using Grace's methods. He color-coded each step. He said each step out loud. He stood and walked while working through problems. To his amazement, he began to understand. The formulas that had seemed like meaningless symbols started making sense. This is incredible, Blake said after successfully solving a complex problem. Why did nobody teach me this before? Because most people learn fine from textbooks, Grace said. Teachers teach the way they learned. Tutors use methods that work for them. But about 30% of people are kinesthetic learners, like us. We need to move and do. We need multiple senses involved. There is nothing wrong with learning this way. It is just different. Blake felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that he was not stupid. Anger that he had spent years thinking he was broken, when really he just needed different tools. How did you figure this out? Blake asked. Grace's expression grew thoughtful. I was failing 8th grade. My mom was so worried. She worked double shifts to afford a tutor, but it did not help. I felt terrible watching her work so hard for nothing. Then I met a teacher at the community center, Mrs. Chen, who volunteered there. She noticed I was always moving, tapping my feet, fidgeting. She said maybe I needed to move while learning instead of fighting it. She taught me these techniques. My grades went from F grades to A grades in 1 semester. 1 semester. Blake said, amazed. 1 semester, Grace confirmed. Because I was not stupid. I was just learning wrong. Same as you. Blake felt tears prick his eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than despair. For the first time in months, he believed he could succeed. They worked until 6 o'clock, when Patricia came upstairs to collect Grace. Patricia looked surprised and pleased to see her daughter helping Blake. Thank you so much, Blake said to Grace as she packed her bag. This helped more than anything else I have tried. We are just getting started, Grace said. Practice the techniques tonight. Use colors, record yourself, move around. Tomorrow we will work on your other subjects. After Grace left, Blake looked at his study materials scattered across the desk. Bright index cards, colorful notes. His voice recorder full of explanations in his own words. These simple tools had given him more understanding in 2 hours than months of expensive tutoring. Blake spent the evening reviewing his notes using Grace's methods. He walked around his room while reciting formulas. He drew colorful diagrams. He recorded himself explaining concepts, then listened while bouncing the stress ball Grace had left him. His mother knocked on the door around 8 o'clock. "How did it go with Grace?" Jennifer asked. "Mom, she is amazing," Blake said enthusiastically. "She taught me things in 2 hours that I have been struggling with for months. I actually understand derivatives now." Jennifer smiled. "I am so glad. Grace seems like a special young woman. Patricia must be very proud." That night, Blake went to bed feeling something he had not felt in a long time, excited about school. He could not wait to try these new techniques on his next test. He could not wait to work with Grace again. Most of all, he felt grateful that Grace had offered her help with such genuine kindness, expecting nothing in return. As he drifted off to sleep, Blake thought about what Grace had said about Mrs. Chen, the volunteer teacher who had helped her. Grace was now doing the same for him, passing forward the kindness she had received. Maybe that was how hope spread in the world. One person helping another, creating a chain of compassion that could reach anyone who needed it. Blake woke the next morning with unusual energy. He had actually enjoyed studying the previous night, which felt like a miracle. He grabbed his backpack and headed downstairs for breakfast, where his father sat reading the newspaper and his mother was preparing scrambled eggs. "You are up early," Richard observed, and smiling. "I have a calculus quiz today," Blake said, sitting down. "I actually feel prepared for once." His parents exchanged hopeful glances. Blake ate quickly, reviewing his colorful index cards while he finished his breakfast. The cards were covered in drawings and diagrams, each color representing a different concept. Looking at them, Blake could remember the physical movements he had made while learning, the sound of his own voice explaining the ideas. The information felt solid in his mind rather than slippery and unreachable. At Phillips Academy, Blake walked into his calculus classroom with his head up. Other students looked at him with curiosity. They were used to seeing Blake slumped in his seat, defeated before class even started. Today he looked different. Mrs. Sullivan, his English teacher, stopped him in the hallway between classes. "Blake, I heard you have been working with a tutor," she said kindly. "How is it going?" "Really well, Mrs. Sullivan," Blake said. "I think I finally found a way to learn that works for me." "I am glad," she said warmly. "You have always struck me as intelligent. Sometimes smart students struggle because they learn differently, not because they cannot learn. Keep working hard." Her words meant more than she knew. Blake had assumed all his teachers thought he was lazy or stupid. Knowing at least one teacher believed in him gave him extra confidence. The calculus quiz was during fourth period. Blake sat at his desk as Mr. Peterson handed out the papers. Blake's hands did not shake this time. He looked at the first problem about derivatives and immediately visualized himself walking across his study. He saw the colored diagrams Grace had helped him create. He heard his own voice explaining the concepts. Blake picked up his pencil and started writing. The answers came easier than they ever had before. He did not freeze or panic. When he encountered a difficult problem, he closed his eyes and mentally went through the movements and colors associated with that concept. The information was there, accessible and clear. He finished the quiz with 10 minutes to spare. He used the extra time to review his answers, checking his work carefully. When Mr. Peterson collected the papers, Blake felt cautiously optimistic. That afternoon, Blake met Grace in his study again. He told her about the quiz. "I actually understood what I was doing," Blake said. "I could picture everything you taught me. Even the hard problems made sense." "That is wonderful," Grace said. "But remember, this is just the start. We need to apply these techniques to all your subjects. Bring out your history and English materials." They spent 2 hours working on Blake's other classes. Grace showed him how to use the same methods for different subjects. For history, they created timeline cards in different colors, each era its own shade. Blake acted out historical events, making them physical rather than abstract. For English literature, Grace had Blake read passages out loud while walking, recording his thoughts and reactions. Everything you learn can be connected to movement, color, or sound, Grace explained. Your brain is not built for passive reading. It is built for active engagement. Work with your brain, not against it. Over the next few days, Blake threw himself into his studies using Grace's techniques. His desk became covered in colorful cards. His voice recorder filled with his explanations of concepts. He walked thousands of steps around his room while studying. His mother commented that she could hear him pacing and talking to himself, but she did not complain. She was just happy to see him engaged with school. A week after the calculus quiz, Mr. Peterson handed back the graded papers. Blake held his breath as he turned his paper over. B-. Not perfect, but so much better than the string of F grades. Blake felt like cheering. He immediately texted Grace the news. Grace responded, "I knew you could do it. This is just the beginning." That evening, Blake showed his father the quiz. Richard studied the B- grade, then looked at his son with genuine pride. "Well done, son," Richard said. "I can see the hard work paying off." "It is all because of Grace," Blake said. "She figured out how I learn. She taught me techniques that actually work for my brain." "I would like to thank her properly," Richard said. "Maybe we could have Patricia and Grace for dinner this weekend." Blake liked that idea. He wanted his family to know Grace better, to see how special she was. Over the next few weeks, Blake's grades continued to improve. His next English paper earned a B+. His history test came back with an A-. Each small victory built his confidence. He stopped dreading school and started looking forward to it. His classmates noticed the change and some asked what his secret was. Blake always gave Grace credit. Word spread through Phillips Academy about the Maid's daughter helping the billionaire's son succeed. Some students found the story touching. Others gossiped about it. Blake did not care what people said. He knew the truth. Grace had saved him from drowning in failure and self-doubt. Grace continued coming to the Thompson mansion 3 times a week. She and Blake developed a comfortable rhythm. They studied together, but they also talked about their lives, their hopes, their dreams. Blake learned that Grace wanted to be a teacher like Mrs. Chen, to help struggling students find their own paths. Grace learned that Blake loved technology and wanted to work in his father's company someday, but only if he could actually understand business and math. "You will understand it," Grace assured him. "You are understanding it now. You just needed the right approach." Patricia would often sit in the kitchen with Jennifer while the teenagers studied. The two mothers bonded over their pride in their children. Jennifer admired how Grace had helped Blake without asking for anything. Patricia appreciated how the Thompson family treated Grace with respect and gratitude rather than superiority. One evening after a study session, Blake walked Grace down to the foyer where Patricia was waiting. Blake's father was there too, having just arrived home from work. "Grace, I want to thank you," Richard said sincerely. "You have done something for Blake that very expensive tutors could not do. You helped him believe in himself again." Grace smiled modestly. Blake always had it in him. He just needed different tools. "Still, you gave those tools freely and kindly," Richard said. "Patricia, you have raised an exceptional young woman." Patricia's eyes glistened with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Grace has always had a generous heart." As Grace and Patricia left, Blake felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This young woman had entered his life at his lowest point and lifted him up with pure kindness. She expected nothing, asked for nothing, gave everything. Blake knew he would never forget her generosity. He also knew he wanted to find ways to pay that kindness forward, though he did not yet know how. Saturday evening arrived, and the Thompson family prepared to host Patricia and Grace for dinner. Jennifer had the dining room set with their nice dishes, but she insisted on a casual, comfortable atmosphere rather than formal elegance. She wanted Patricia and Grace to feel welcome, not intimidated. Blake helped his mother set the table, carefully placing colorful napkins at each seat. He had chosen bright blue ones, remembering how Grace taught him that color made everything more memorable and meaningful. "You really like Grace, do not you?" Jennifer asked as they worked. "She changed my life, Mom," Blake said simply. "Before Grace, I thought I was stupid. Now I know I am just different. That is a huge gift to give someone. Jennifer smiled and touched Blake's shoulder. She is a good friend. When Patricia and Grace arrived, they brought a homemade apple pie. Grace wore a bright red dress that made her look cheerful and confident. The family gathered in the dining room, and conversation flowed easily. Richard asked Grace about her plans for college, and Grace explained she wanted to study education. "The world needs more teachers like you," Richard said. "Teachers who understand that children learn differently and need individual approaches." During dinner, Blake could not stop smiling. His family was honoring someone who had shown him such kindness. Patricia looked proud and happy. Grace seemed comfortable and at ease. This dinner felt like a celebration of hope and second chances. After they finished eating, Richard cleared his throat. "Grace, I want to discuss something with you," he said. "Blake tells us you refuse payment for tutoring him. I respect your generosity, but I would like to do something to help you in return. Would you allow me to cover your college application fees? And perhaps we could set up a small college fund to help with expenses." Grace's eyes widened. Blake saw her glance at her mother, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Mr. Thompson, that is incredibly generous," Grace said carefully. "But I helped Blake because I wanted to, not for reward." "I know that," Richard said gently. "But when someone shows such kindness to my family, I want to respond with kindness too. Patricia has worked for us for 10 years with dedication and integrity. She has raised a daughter who embodies those same qualities. Please let me do this. Not as payment, but as a blessing I am privileged to give." Blake watched Grace struggle with the decision. He understood her hesitation. She had helped him purely from goodness, and accepting money might feel like it tainted that purity. But Blake also saw his father's sincere desire to help. Patricia reached over and squeezed Grace's hand. "Honey, sometimes we need to accept blessings when they are offered with a good heart. The application fees alone would cost hundreds of dollars we do not have saved. This gift could change your future." Grace looked at her mother, then at Richard. Slowly, she nodded. "Thank you," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much. I do not know what to say." "Say you will keep being the wonderful person you are," Jennifer said warmly, "and that you will stay in Blake's life as his friend." "Always," Grace said, smiling at Blake. After dinner, Blake and Grace went to his study while their parents talked downstairs. Blake wanted to show Grace his latest progress on his history project. But first, he needed to express something that had been on his mind. "Grace, I have been thinking," Blake said. "You helped me, and Mrs. Chen helped you. That is how kindness works, right? It passes from one person to another." "I think so," Grace agreed. "When someone helps you, you want to help someone else." "I want to do something bigger," Blake said. "I want to help other students who learn like us. Students who are struggling and thinking they are stupid when they just need different approaches." Grace's eyes lit up. "What did you have in mind?" "What if we started a tutoring program at my school?" Blake suggested. "A peer tutoring program where students who struggled and found their way help other struggling students. We could teach your techniques. We could show people that there are different ways to learn." Grace sat forward excitedly. "That is a beautiful idea. Students often learn better from other students anyway. Adults can be intimidating. But another teenager who understands the struggle? That could be powerful." "Would you help me?" Blake asked. "We could present the idea to the school administration together." "Of course I will help," Grace said. "Let us plan it out." They spent the next hour brainstorming. They talked about how the program would work. Students who had overcome learning challenges would be trained in multiple learning techniques. They would meet with struggling students and help them identify their learning styles. The program would be free and voluntary. Its goal would not be to raise grades but to help students understand themselves as learners. Blake felt excitement building. This project felt important, meaningful. He could help other kids avoid the pain he had experienced. He could pass forward the gift Grace had given him. Over the next 2 weeks, Blake and Grace developed a formal proposal for the tutoring program. They created a presentation with data about different learning styles, testimonials from Blake about how the techniques had helped him, and a clear plan for implementation. Blake asked Mrs. Sullivan for advice, and she enthusiastically supported the idea. "This is exactly what Phillips Academy needs," Mrs. Sullivan said. "We focus so much on excellence that we sometimes forget students reach excellence through different paths. Your program could change lives." Mrs. Sullivan helped them schedule a meeting with the school administration. Blake and Grace practiced their presentation multiple times. Blake was nervous about public speaking, but Grace reminded him to use his own techniques. He color-coded his notes, practiced while walking, recorded himself and listened back. The day of the presentation arrived. Blake and Grace stood before the school board, including the headmaster Dr. Reynolds and several department chairs. Blake's hand shook slightly as he began speaking, but Grace's presence beside him gave him strength. Blake explained his academic struggles and how Grace's techniques had transformed his learning. He presented research about kinesthetic learning and multiple intelligence theories. Grace demonstrated some of the methods, showing how colorful index cards and movement could make abstract concepts concrete. "Every student deserves to learn in a way that works for their brain," Blake concluded. This program would help struggling students discover their strengths rather than focus on their weaknesses. It would create a culture of peer support and understanding. And it would not cost the school anything except permission and a small space to meet. Dr. Reynolds and the board members asked questions. How would tutors be selected? How would they be trained? What oversight would exist? Blake and Grace had thought through all these details. They answered confidently and thoroughly. When the presentation ended, the board members looked impressed. Dr. Reynolds smiled. "This is one of the most thoughtful student initiatives I have seen in my 20 years as headmaster," he said. "I'm inclined to approve it. The board will discuss and give you our answer by the end of the week." Blake and Grace left the meeting room elated. They had done their best. Now they had to wait and hope. 3 days later, Blake received an email from Dr. Reynolds. His heart pounded as he opened it. The first word was congratulations. Blake let out a whoop and immediately called Grace. "We did it," he said when she answered. "They approved the program." Grace screamed with joy. "Really? They really approved it? Really? They want us to start recruiting tutors next week. They are giving us a room in the learning center. They are even going to mention it in the school newsletter." "Blake, this is amazing," Grace said. "We are going to help so many students." That night at dinner, Blake told his family the news. Richard looked at his son with obvious pride. "You took your own struggle and turned it into something that will help hundreds of people," Richard said. "That is the mark of true character, son." Blake felt his chest swell. A few months ago, he had been ready to give up on school entirely. Now he was starting a program that could change other students' lives. All because one person had shown him kindness when he needed it most. The following Monday, Blake and Grace arrived at Phillips Academy together to begin recruiting tutors for their program. The school had posted flyers around campus. "Have you struggled and succeeded? Help other students find their path. Join the Peer Learning Connection." They set up a table in the student commons during lunch period. Blake felt nervous as students walked by, some curious, others dismissive. A few stopped to read the flyer. Blake and Grace had prepared simple handouts explaining the program and what they were looking for in tutors. The first student to approach was a girl named Hannah Brooks, a junior. She wore her blonde hair in a ponytail and had kind eyes that reminded Blake of Grace. "Is this for real?" Hannah asked. "You are really starting a program to help struggling students?" "Yes," Grace said warmly. "We are looking for students who have had academic challenges but found ways to succeed. Students who understand what it is like to struggle and can help others with patience and empathy." Hannah bit her lip. "I failed freshman English twice. Everyone thought I was lazy. But I had dyslexia that nobody diagnosed until last year. Once I got help and learned strategies, my grades improved dramatically. I am on the honor roll now." Blake felt an immediate connection. That is exactly the kind of experience we need. You understand what it is like to be misunderstood and to find your way. Would you be interested in becoming a peer tutor? "I would love to," Hannah said. "I hated feeling stupid. If I can help one person avoid that feeling, it would mean everything." Throughout lunch, several more students stopped by. Some were simply curious. Others shared stories of their own struggles. A boy named Tyler Garcia had ADHD and had found success through structured schedules and movement breaks. A girl named Rachel Kim had anxiety that made test-taking nearly impossible until she learned breathing techniques and self-compassion practices. Another boy, James O'Neill, had nearly dropped out before a teacher helped him discover his gift for hands-on learning. By the end of lunch period, Blake and Grace had 12 students interested in becoming tutors. Each one had a story of struggle and triumph. Each one wanted to help others find hope. Mrs. Sullivan stopped by as they were packing up. "This is wonderful," she said. "You have created something special here. These students will relate to each other in ways that teachers cannot always achieve." Over the next week, Blake and Grace organized training sessions for their new tutors. They met in the Learning Center classroom the school had provided. Grace taught the group about different learning styles: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and combinations. Blake shared the specific techniques that had helped him: color coding, movement, recording, and physical demonstrations. "The most important thing," Grace told the group, "is to meet each student where they are. Do not judge. Do not rush. Listen to how they learn best and help them discover their own strengths." The tutors practiced on each other, trying different techniques and providing feedback. Hannah discovered she was excellent at helping students with reading challenges because of her own dyslexia experience. Tyler's ADHD gave him insight into helping easily distracted students focus. Rachel's anxiety experience helped her teach stress management and test preparation strategies. Blake watched the group bond and felt overwhelming gratitude. A few months ago, he had been alone in his struggles, convinced he was the only one failing. Now he was surrounded by people who understood, who had overcome similar challenges, who wanted to help others succeed. The program officially launched 2 weeks later. Students could sign up for tutoring sessions through the school's website. Blake and Grace carefully matched tutors with students based on learning styles and subjects. They started with 10 students seeking help. Blake's first tutoring session was with a freshman boy named Chris Peterson. Chris was failing math and looked defeated when he walked into the learning center. Blake saw himself 6 months earlier in Chris's slumped shoulders and downcast eyes. "I am Blake," he said, shaking Chris's hand. "I used to fail math too. Actually, I failed most things. Want to know how I stopped failing?" Chris looked up with cautious hope. "Really? You used to fail too?" 5 F grades in 6 weeks, Blake said honestly. "I thought I was stupid. Turns out I just learned differently. Let me show you what worked for me." Blake pulled out colorful index cards and markers. He had Chris stand up and move around while learning. He showed Chris how to connect abstract math to physical movement. Within an hour, Chris was smiling and understanding concepts that had confused him for weeks. "This is so much better than my regular tutor," Chris said. "You explain things in a way that makes sense." Blake felt a rush of joy. He was making a difference. He was passing forward the gift Grace had given him. Grace tutored a girl named Sophia Martinez, who struggled with organizing her thoughts for English essays. Grace showed Sophia how to use colored cards for different ideas, how to physically arrange them to create structure, how to speak ideas aloud before writing them down. Sophia went from paralyzed with writer's block to excited about her assignments. Hannah helped a dyslexic freshman named Lucas Andrews discover audiobooks and text-to-speech software. Tyler taught a hyperactive sophomore named Ethan Walsh that movement during studying was not a problem, but a solution. Rachel guided an anxious junior named Olivia Chen through test-taking strategies that calmed her nerves. Word spread quickly through Phillips Academy. More students signed up for tutoring. More students volunteered to become tutors. The program grew from 10 participants to 30, then 50. The Learning Center buzzed with activity each afternoon as struggling students discovered they were not alone and capable students discovered the joy of helping others. Dr. Reynolds visited the program several times and was consistently impressed. He told Blake and Grace that standardized test scores were improving among program participants. More importantly, student well-being surveys showed increased confidence and decreased anxiety. One afternoon, Blake's former tutor, Mr. Bennett, stopped by the Learning Center. Blake tensed, expecting criticism or judgment. Mr. Bennett had been frustrated by Blake's lack of progress during their sessions. But Mr. Bennett's expression was thoughtful rather than hostile. He watched Blake working with a student, using colorful cards and movement-based learning. He saw how engaged and happy the student looked. "Blake, can I speak with you for a moment?" Mr. Bennett asked. They stepped into the hallway. Blake prepared himself for negativity. "I owe you an apology," Mr. Bennett said. "I assumed you were not trying hard enough. I did not recognize that you needed different teaching methods. Watching you help that student just now, I see how wrong I was. You are a natural teacher." Blake felt stunned. He had not expected this. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. That means a lot." "I should have listened to you more," Mr. Bennett continued. "I should have tried different approaches. Instead, I made you feel inadequate. I am sorry for that." Blake appreciated the apology, though part of him was angry that Mr. Bennett had not tried harder when Blake was desperate for help. But he chose grace over resentment. "We all do our best with what we know," Blake said. "Now you know about different learning styles. Maybe you can use this knowledge to help your other students." Mr. Bennett nodded. "I will. Thank you for the lesson, Blake." As Mr. Bennett walked away, Grace appeared at Blake's side. "That was big of you," she said. "You could have been angry with him." "Being angry does not help anyone," Blake said. "Besides, you taught me that kindness spreads. Maybe Mr. Bennett will be kinder to his next struggling student because of this." Grace smiled. "You are learning the most important lesson of all. Success is not just about grades. It is about how we treat each other along the way." That evening, Blake's father asked about the program over dinner. "It is incredible, Dad," Blake said. "We are helping so many students. And not just academically. We are helping them feel better about themselves. That is what Grace did for me, and now I get to do it for others." Richard smiled. "I am proud of you, son. You took a painful experience and turned it into something beautiful. That is real strength." Blake thought about how far he had come. From a failing, despairing student to someone who helped others succeed. From feeling worthless to knowing he had value and purpose. From isolation to community. All because one person had offered kindness at exactly the right moment. As Blake went to bed that night, he thought about all the students the program would help in the future. Hundreds, maybe thousands over the years. A chain of compassion started by Mrs. Chen helping Grace, continued by Grace helping Blake, and now spreading through Phillips Academy and beyond. That was how kindness worked. It multiplied. It grew. It transformed lives in ways nobody could predict or measure. Blake fell asleep feeling grateful, purposeful, and hopeful. Tomorrow he would tutor 3 more students. Next week, they would train 5 new tutors. Next month they would help even more struggling learners discover their paths. The work would continue, one student at a time, one act of kindness at a time, creating ripples that would spread farther than Blake could imagine. 3 months into the program, the peer learning connection had become one of the most popular activities at Phillips Academy. Over 80 students participated, either as tutors or learners. Success stories spread through the school. Students who had been failing were now passing. Students who had been anxious were now confident. Students who had felt isolated were now connected to a supportive community. Blake and Grace were featured in the school newsletter. Local Boston media picked up the story and ran articles about the student-led program. Blake's father showed him the Boston Globe piece over breakfast one morning. Billionaire's son starts revolutionary tutoring program after Maid's daughter helps him succeed. Blake cringed at the headline's focus on wealth and social class, but the article itself was positive. It explained how Grace's kindness had inspired Blake, and how they had worked together to create something that helped many students. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. Then the trouble started. It began with whispers. Some students complained that the tutoring program was becoming too influential. A few teachers worried that it was undermining traditional teaching methods. But the real problem came from an unexpected source, Mr. Bennett. Blake's former tutor had initially seemed supportive after his apology. But as the program grew more successful and received more attention, Mr. Bennett's attitude changed. He began questioning the program's effectiveness. He suggested to other faculty that students were relying too much on peer help instead of learning independently. Then, during a faculty meeting Blake did not know about, Mr. Bennett raised a serious concern. He suspected students in the program were sharing test answers rather than actually learning. He specifically questioned whether Blake himself had truly learned material or was just memorizing answers provided by tutors. Dr. Reynolds took the accusation seriously. He called Blake and Grace to his office on a Tuesday afternoon. Blake's stomach churned as they walked through the administrative building. The headmaster's expression was grave. "Blake, Grace, please sit," Dr. Reynolds said. "I need to discuss a serious matter with you." They sat, and Blake felt his hands start to shake. What had they done wrong? "Mr. Bennett has raised concerns about the integrity of your tutoring program," Dr. Reynolds said carefully. "He suggests that some students may be receiving improper help, specifically sharing test information rather than learning concepts." Blake felt his face flush with anger and hurt. "That is not true. We teach learning techniques, not answers. Everyone who uses the program is learning for real." "I believe you," Dr. Reynolds said. "However, Mr. Bennett has specifically questioned your own academic improvement, Blake. He suggests you may be benefiting from shared answers rather than genuine learning." Blake felt like he had been punched. After all his hard work, after all his growth, someone was questioning whether his success was even real. Grace spoke up, her voice steady but firm. "Dr. Reynolds, that accusation is insulting and wrong. Blake works harder than any student I know. He learned techniques that work with his learning style. His improvement is genuine." "Again, I believe you," Dr. Reynolds said. "But to put this matter to rest, I need Blake to demonstrate his knowledge publicly. The school board has requested that Blake take a comprehensive exam covering all the material he has studied this semester. The exam will be supervised to ensure complete independence." Blake felt panic rising. A comprehensive exam on everything? Under special supervision? It felt like being on trial. "When?" Blake asked, his voice tight. "Next Friday," Dr. Reynolds said. "I know this is stressful, but it is the only way to definitively prove the program's integrity. If you pass this exam, all questions will be answered. The program will be validated beyond doubt." Blake and Grace left the office in stunned silence. When they got outside, Blake's composure cracked. "This is not fair," he said, his voice shaking. "I have worked so hard. I have changed my entire approach to learning. And now Mr. Bennett is trying to destroy everything because of his own pride." Grace took his hand. "I know it is not fair. But think about this as an opportunity. You get to prove once and for all that your learning is real. You get to show everyone that different learning methods work. This exam will silence all doubts." "What if I fail?" Blake asked. "What if all the stress makes me freeze up like I used to?" "You will not fail," Grace said firmly, "because you know how to learn now. You have tools and techniques. You are not the same person who was failing 6 months ago. You are stronger and smarter, not because anyone gave you answers, but because you discovered how your brain works." That evening, Blake told his family about the exam requirement. His father was outraged. "This is ridiculous," Richard said. "You have proven yourself over and over. Your grades have been consistently strong for months." "I know, Dad," Blake said. "But I have to do this. I have to prove that the program works and that my learning is real. If I do not, Mr. Bennett's accusations will hurt all the other students in the program." Jennifer hugged her son. "You are going to do wonderfully. We believe in you completely." Blake spent the next week preparing for the comprehensive exam. Grace came over every evening to help him review. They used all the techniques they had developed: colorful index cards for math formulas, recorded explanations for history concepts, physical demonstrations for science principles, and movement-based study for everything. Blake's tutoring students heard about the exam and rallied around him. Hannah brought him good luck cards. Tyler made him a stress ball with an encouraging message. Rachel taught him additional anxiety management techniques. Chris, his first tutoring student, stopped by to thank Blake for changing his life. "You helped me when nobody else could," Chris said. "Now I am passing math. I am actually understanding it. That is because of you. No matter what happens on this test, you already proved yourself to me." Blake felt emotional hearing this. The program had helped so many students. He could not let Mr. Bennett's accusations destroy what they had built. Mrs. Sullivan also offered support. She visited Blake during study hall. "I am furious about this situation," she said. Mr. Bennett is acting out of wounded pride. But Blake, you have an opportunity here. When you pass this exam, and I believe you will, it will prove not just your own success, but the validity of different learning approaches. You will help countless future students who learn differently. The night before the exam, Blake could not sleep. He lay in bed reviewing mental images of colorful cards, replaying recorded explanations in his mind, visualizing physical movements associated with concepts. He thought about how far he had come. 6 months ago, he had been ready to give up on education entirely. Now he was fighting to prove that his education was real and valuable. Grace texted him at midnight, "You are brilliant. You are capable. You are ready. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you will show everyone what you are made of." Blake smiled at her message. Grace had believed in him from the beginning. She had offered help when he was drowning. She had taught him not just learning techniques, but also how to believe in himself. Whatever happened tomorrow, Blake knew he was not the same broken person he had been before Grace entered his life. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. Blake dressed carefully, choosing a bright blue shirt because Grace had taught him that color helped with confidence and focus. He ate a good breakfast and reviewed his mental notes one final time. At Phillips Academy, students lined the hallways as Blake walked to the testing room. Many gave him encouraging words or thumbs-up gestures. Some held signs supporting him. Blake felt surrounded by community and care. Even if he failed this exam, he had already succeeded in something more important. He had helped create a culture of compassion and mutual support. Grace met him outside the testing room. She hugged him tightly. "Remember everything I taught you," she whispered. "Trust your brain. Trust your techniques. You have got this." Blake entered the room where Dr. Reynolds and 2 board members waited. The exam sat on a desk in the center of the room. 3 hours to complete comprehensive questions on math, science, history, and English. Blake sat down, took a deep breath, and picked up his pencil. As he read the first question, Blake felt his training kick in. He visualized colorful diagrams. He mentally moved through physical demonstrations. He heard his recorded voice explaining concepts. The information was there, solid and accessible. He began writing, and the words flowed naturally. Outside in the hallway, Grace sat on a bench with her mother Patricia, both praying and hoping. Mrs. Sullivan sat with them, along with Hannah, Tyler, Rachel, and Chris. They had all skipped class to wait for Blake. They were his community, his support system, his proof that kindness created bonds stronger than any test score. 3 hours later, Blake emerged from the testing room, exhausted but calm. Grace rushed to him. "How did it go?" she asked. Blake smiled. "I did my best. I used every technique you taught me. Whatever happens, I know I gave it everything." Grace hugged him again. "I am so proud of you." Dr. Reynolds told Blake the exam would be graded by external evaluators to ensure complete fairness. Results would be available by Monday. Blake had the weekend to wait and wonder. Those 3 days felt endless. Blake tried to distract himself, but his mind kept returning to the exam. What if he had made careless mistakes? What if his techniques had failed under pressure? What if Mr. Bennett was somehow proven right? But every time doubt crept in, Blake remembered the journey he had taken. He remembered Grace's kindness. He remembered the students he had helped. He remembered his own growth from despair to hope. Whatever the test showed, Blake knew his transformation had been real. No exam score could take that away. The weekend passed slowly for Blake. He tried to keep busy, volunteering at a community center Saturday morning and working on college application essays Sunday afternoon. But the waiting gnawed at him. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped, hoping for news from Dr. Reynolds. Grace texted him constantly with encouragement. She reminded him that he had prepared well and used all their techniques. She sent funny memes to lift his spirits and inspirational quotes about perseverance. Her steady presence helped Blake stay grounded. Sunday evening, Blake sat with his parents in the living room. His father put down his newspaper and looked at his son with concern. "However this turns out, you should be proud," Richard said. "You faced a challenge with courage and dignity. You did not run from it. That shows real character." "Thanks, Dad," Blake said. I just hate that this whole situation happened because Mr. Bennett could not handle that his methods did not work for me. Some people struggle when others succeed in ways they do not understand, Jennifer said wisely. Mr. Bennett probably feels threatened by the success of your program. Instead of learning from it, he attacked it. But that says more about him than about you. Blake knew his mother was right, but it still hurt. He had never wanted to make Mr. Bennett look bad. He had just wanted to find a way to learn that worked for him. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly. Blake dressed in comfortable clothes, choosing a bright green sweater that Grace had once said brought out his eyes. He needed all the confidence he could gather. At Phillips Academy, Blake could feel tension in the air. Students whispered as he walked past. Some offered supportive smiles. Others looked curious or concerned. The whole school seemed to be waiting for news about the exam results. Blake made it through first and second period in a fog. He could barely focus on his classes. His mind kept wandering to the exam, to what the results would mean for him, for Grace, for the tutoring program, for all the students who had found hope through their work. Third period, an announcement came over the loudspeaker. Blake Thompson, please report to the headmaster's office. Blake's stomach dropped. This was it. He gathered his books slowly, aware of every eye in the classroom watching him. As he walked through the hallways toward the administrative building, he prayed silently. Not just for good results, but for peace and strength to handle whatever came. Grace was waiting outside Dr. Reynolds' office. She must have been called down too. She rushed to Blake and took his hand. Together, she said simply. They entered the office. Dr. Reynolds sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. Two school board members sat in chairs against the wall. Mr. Bennett stood near the window, his arms crossed. Blake felt his jaw tighten seeing his former tutor there. Blake, Grace, please sit, Dr. Reynolds said. They sat together, their hands still clasped. Blake's heart pounded so hard he thought everyone could hear it. Dr. Reynolds picked up a folder from his desk. The exam results have been evaluated by 3 independent education specialists. They graded your work without knowing your name or the circumstances. Their assessment was thorough and objective. Blake held his breath. Blake, you scored in the top 10% of students tested on equivalent material nationwide, Dr. Reynolds said, his serious expression breaking into a smile. Your math section was particularly strong. Your essay responses showed deep understanding and critical thinking. The evaluators noted sophisticated problem-solving approaches and creative demonstrations of knowledge. Blake felt tears spring to his eyes. Grace squeezed his hand so hard it hurt, but Blake did not care. He had done it. He had proven himself. Furthermore, Dr. Reynolds continued, the evaluators specifically commented on the evidence of kinesthetic and multisensory learning approaches in your answers. They said your work demonstrated someone who has truly mastered material through alternative learning methods. This completely validates not only your personal achievement, but also the teaching approach of your tutoring program. Blake could not hold back anymore. He started crying, tears of relief and joy streaming down his face. Grace cried too, hugging him tightly. Dr. Reynolds looked at Mr. Bennett. As you can see, your concerns were unfounded. Blake's success is genuine. The peer learning connection uses legitimate and effective teaching methods. Mr. Bennett's face had gone pale. He looked at Blake with what might have been shame or resentment. Blake could not tell which. I made an error in judgment, Mr. Bennett said stiffly. I apologized to Blake and to the program. Blake wanted to feel angry or vindicated, but instead he just felt tired and relieved. He had no energy for resentment. I accept your apology, Blake said quietly. I hope this helps you understand that different students need different approaches. Maybe you can use this knowledge to help your other students who struggle. Mr. Bennett nodded curtly and left the room. Blake watched him go, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. Some people learn from their mistakes. Others just felt bitter about being proven wrong. Dr. Reynolds addressed the school board members. I propose we not only continue the peer learning connection, but expand it. We should allocate resources to train more tutors and reach more students. This program represents exactly the kind of student-led innovation we should be supporting. The board members agreed enthusiastically. One of them, a woman named Dr. Patricia Walsh, spoke directly to Blake and Grace. You two have created something remarkable, she said. You identified a real need, developed a solution, and implemented it with care and effectiveness. Phillips Academy is proud to have students like you. After the meeting ended, Blake and Grace walked out of the office to find a crowd waiting in the hallway. Mrs. Sullivan stood there along with Hannah, Tyler, Rachel, Chris, and dozens of other students from the tutoring program. When they saw Blake's tear-streaked but smiling face, the crowd erupted in cheers. Students hugged Blake and congratulated him. Mrs. Sullivan wiped tears from her own eyes. I never doubted you for a second, she said. Blake felt overwhelmed by the support. These people had believed in him. They had waited to celebrate his success or comfort his failure. This was what community meant. This was what kindness created. Grace pulled Blake aside as the celebration continued. I knew you would do it, she said. I never had a single doubt. I had plenty of doubts, Blake admitted. But you taught me something more important than learning techniques. You taught me to believe in myself even when everything seems hopeless. That is the real gift you gave me. Grace smiled. We gave that gift to each other. You showed me that my methods could help someone besides myself. You helped me see that I could make a real difference. We are a team, Blake. That afternoon, news of Blake's exam results spread through Phillips Academy. The school newspaper published a special edition. Local media picked up the story again, this time focusing on how Blake had proven the effectiveness of alternative learning approaches. The headline in the Boston Education blog read, Student proves alternative learning works, silences critics. Blake's father called him in the middle of the day, having seen the news. I am so proud of you, son. Not just for passing the test, but for handling the pressure with grace. You could have been angry or bitter. Instead, you stayed focused and kind. That is real strength. That evening, the Thompson family hosted Patricia and Grace for a celebration dinner. Jennifer made Blake's favorite meal, and they ate together laughing and talking about the incredible journey. Richard proposed a toast. To Blake and Grace, he said, raising his glass. For showing us that kindness and determination can overcome any obstacle. For creating something beautiful out of struggle. For proving that the best help often comes from unexpected sources. They clinked glasses, and Blake felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced his greatest challenge and emerged stronger. More importantly, he had learned that he was never alone in his struggles. Community, compassion, and courage could carry anyone through even the darkest times. After dinner, Blake and Grace sat in the study where they had spent so many hours learning together. Blake looked at the colorful index cards still pinned to his bulletin board, the voice recorder that held hundreds of his explanations, the stress ball Grace had given him. This room changed my life, Blake said. Before, it was a place of failure and frustration. You transformed it into a place of growth and hope. Grace smiled. You did the transforming, Blake. I just showed you some tools. You did the hard work of changing your approach, believing in yourself, and building something that helps others. What happens now? Blake asked. The program is validated. We are helping students. What is the next step? Grace's eyes lit up with excitement. We keep growing. We train more tutors. We help more students. We show the world that there are many ways to learn and every way is valid. And maybe, someday, we change how education works so that no student ever has to feel the way you felt 6 months ago. Blake nodded, feeling a sense of purpose and mission. His personal struggle had become something larger than himself. It had become a movement to help others, to spread kindness, to transform education one student at a time. I want to pause here and ask you something important. Have you ever had someone believe in you when you didn't believe in yourself? That person might have changed your life. Take a moment to comment below and share who believed in you. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories about hope, second chances, and the power of human kindness. The week following Blake's exam triumph felt like a whirlwind. Media attention on the peer learning connection intensified. Education blogs, local news channels, and parenting magazines all wanted to feature the story of how a struggling student and his unlikely tutor had created a revolutionary program. Blake tried to stay grounded through it all. He continued attending classes, tutoring students, and working with Grace to train new peer tutors. But he could feel something shifting. The program was outgrowing Phillips Academy. Requests came from other schools wanting to implement similar approaches. Parents from across Boston reached out asking for help with their struggling children. One Thursday afternoon, Dr. Reynolds called Blake and Grace to his office again. This time, the atmosphere was celebratory rather than tense. "I have been contacted by the Boston Public Schools superintendent," Dr. Reynolds said. "They want to implement the Learning Connection model across the district. They are asking if you would be willing to help train tutors at other schools." Blake and Grace looked at each other in amazement. Their small program, started in one classroom, could spread across an entire school district. "Of course we would be willing," Grace said. "But how would that work? We are still high school students ourselves." "The superintendent is proposing a partnership," Dr. Reynolds explained. "You would create training materials and curriculum. You would conduct weekend workshops for interested students and teachers. The district would provide resources and support. It would be a significant time commitment, but it could help thousands of students." Blake felt excitement and nervousness mixing together. When would this start? "They want to begin with a pilot program in January," Dr. Reynolds said. 5 schools to start, then expansion based on results. "You have changed something fundamental here. Now others want to learn from you." That evening, Blake discussed the opportunity with his father. Richard had been watching his son's transformation with increasing admiration and had been thinking about ways to support the program's growth. "Blake, I want to propose something," Richard said. "Let me establish a foundation dedicated to supporting alternative learning programs. We could fund the expansion of peer learning connection. We could support research into different learning styles. We could provide resources to underprivileged schools that lack funding for special programs." Blake stared at his father. "You would do that?" "Son, watching you struggle nearly broke my heart," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "Watching you succeed because someone showed you kindness saved you. Now I want to help save other students like you. This foundation would be my way of paying forward the gift Grace gave our family." "That would be incredible, Dad," Blake said. "How big of a foundation?" "I am thinking an initial endowment of $10 million, Richard said, "with plans to grow it over time. I have already talked to other business leaders in Boston who want to contribute. Your story inspired them to think about the students who struggle in their own families or communities." Blake felt overwhelmed. $10 million to support what he and Grace had started. It felt surreal. "There is one condition," Richard continued. "I want Grace on the foundation board. She is the heart of this program. Her expertise and compassion need to guide its growth." Blake immediately agreed. That evening, he called Grace to tell her about his father's proposal. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Grace, are you there?" Blake asked. "I am here," Grace said, her voice shaky. "I am just processing. Blake, this is too much. I helped you because I wanted to. I never imagined anything like this." "I know," Blake said. "But think about all the students we could help. Think about how many kids are sitting in classrooms right now feeling the way I felt 6 months ago, thinking they are stupid when they just learn differently. We could reach them. We could change their lives." "When you put it that way," Grace said, "how can I say no? Of course I will help. This is what I have always wanted to do. I just never imagined it would happen so soon or so big." Over the next few weeks, Richard worked with lawyers and education consultants to establish the Learning Pathways Foundation. The board included Richard, Grace, 2 education professors from Boston University, a clinical psychologist who specialized in learning differences, and Mrs. Sullivan, who took a leave from teaching to work on the foundation full-time. The foundation's first major action was to fund a comprehensive expansion of the peer learning connection across 5 Boston public schools. Blake and Grace spent their winter break creating detailed training materials. They filmed video tutorials demonstrating different techniques. They wrote guides for identifying learning styles. They developed assessment tools to measure program effectiveness. The first training weekend took place in January at Boston University. 80 students from 5 different schools attended, along with 20 teachers and counselors. Blake felt nervous speaking in front of such a large crowd, but Grace squeezed his hand before they started. "Just remember why we are doing this," she whispered. Every person here has the potential to change someone's life. Blake and Grace presented their story and methods to the rapt audience. They demonstrated colorful index card techniques, movement-based learning, and multisensory approaches. They shared Blake's exam results as proof that alternative methods worked. They explained how to match tutors with struggling students based on learning styles and challenges. During the lunch break, students and teachers surrounded Blake and Grace with questions and stories. A teacher from a low-income school in Roxbury said she had 3 students on the verge of dropping out who might benefit from peer tutoring. A high school junior from Dorchester said he struggled with reading comprehension, but was strong in math and wanted to tutor others while learning strategies for his own challenges. One mother approached with tears in her eyes. She had traveled from Cambridge just to meet Blake and Grace. "My daughter has dyslexia," the woman said. "She thinks she is stupid. She cries every night about school. Your story gives me hope that we can help her find her way." Grace hugged the woman. "Your daughter is not stupid. She just needs the right tools. We will help you find resources. Nobody should feel hopeless about learning." The training weekend ended with commitments from all 5 pilot schools to implement the program. Each school identified potential tutors and created schedules for training and tutoring sessions. The foundation would provide materials, oversight, and funding for snacks and supplies. February brought the official launch of the expanded Peer Learning Connection. Local media covered the story extensively. The Boston Globe ran a front-page feature. Teen creates foundation to help struggling students after Maid's daughter teaches him to learn. Blake cringed at the headline's focus on social class, but the article itself was beautiful. It told the full story of how Grace's kindness had sparked a movement. It included testimonials from students who had been helped. It featured quotes from education experts praising the program's approach. Within a week, the foundation received over 200 inquiries from schools across Massachusetts wanting to participate. Richard allocated additional funding to expand faster than originally planned. By March, 20 schools had implemented the program. By April, 50 schools. The movement was growing exponentially. Grace received a full scholarship to Boston University's School of Education, sponsored by the foundation. The scholarship included funding for all expenses, allowing Grace to focus on her studies without worrying about money. Patricia cried when they received the news, hugging her daughter tightly. "I always knew you were special," Patricia said through tears. "But seeing the world recognize it makes my heart burst with pride." Blake got accepted to Boston University too, planning to study business and education. He wanted to work with the foundation while learning how to sustain and grow non-profit organizations. He and Grace would attend college together, continuing their partnership in helping struggling students. In May, Phillips Academy held a special assembly to honor Blake and Grace. Dr. Reynolds presented them with the school's highest student achievement award. Blake gave a short speech to the entire student body. "6 months ago, I was ready to give up on school and myself," Blake said. "I felt worthless and broken. Then someone showed me kindness when I needed it most. Grace did not have to help me. She gained nothing from it except the joy of seeing someone else succeed. That kindness changed everything. It saved me. It led to a program that has now helped thousands of students. All from one person deciding to be kind to someone who was struggling. Never underestimate the power of compassion. Never dismiss someone who is having a hard time. You might be exactly the person who can change their life." The assembly erupted in standing ovation. Blake saw tears on many faces, including his parents, his teachers, and his fellow tutors from the program. Grace stood beside him, her hand in his, both of them overwhelmed by how far they had come. That evening, Blake and Grace sat on the Thompsons' back patio, watching the sunset paint the Boston sky in shades of orange and pink. They reflected on the incredible journey from Blake's lowest point to this moment of triumph and purpose. "Did you ever imagine it would become this big?" Blake asked. "Never," Grace admitted. "I just wanted to help one person who was hurting. I did not think about it creating a foundation or changing school systems. I just thought about you, sitting in that library, looking so defeated." "Your kindness literally changed thousands of lives," Blake said. "Students who would have dropped out are now succeeding. Students who thought they were stupid are now confident. Teachers who were frustrated are now empowered with new tools. All because you took time to care about someone you barely knew. Grace smiled. That is how divine favor works, I think. God puts people in each other's paths at exactly the right moment. I was meant to walk by that library window. I was meant to see you struggling. You were meant to accept my help. All of it was orchestrated by something bigger than us. Blake nodded thoughtfully. He had never been particularly religious, but after everything that had happened, he believed in grace, both the person and the concept. He believed in second chances, in unexpected blessings, in the power of one person's kindness to create ripples that spread farther than anyone could imagine. Thank you, Blake said simply, for everything. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For believing in me when I did not believe in myself. For teaching me how to learn. For inspiring me to help others. Thank you. Grace took his hand. Thank you for accepting help. Thank you for working so hard. Thank you for using your privilege and resources to create something good. Thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and to admit you needed support. Not everyone can do that. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars appeared. Tomorrow would bring more work, more students to help, more programs to build. But tonight, they simply appreciated how far they had come and how blessed they had been. Blake thought about all the people who had played roles in his redemption. Grace, Patricia, his parents, Mrs. Sullivan, the peer tutors, even Mr. Bennett in his own strange way. Every person had contributed something. Every act of kindness had mattered. The future stretched ahead bright with possibility. College, the foundation's continued growth, helping more students discover their potential. Blake could not wait to see what happened next. But he also knew that whatever came, he would remember this truth. Kindness saves lives, community creates strength, and everyone deserves a second chance to find their way. 6 months passed in a blur of activity and growth. The Learning Pathways Foundation expanded to over 100 schools across Massachusetts. Blake and Grace started their freshman year at Boston University, both thriving academically and continuing their foundation work on weekends. The Peer Learning Connection helped over 5,000 students in its first full year. Dropout rates decreased in participating schools. Test scores improved. More importantly, student well-being surveys showed dramatic increases in confidence and decreases in academic anxiety. Blake maintained a 3.8 GPA at Boston University, using all the techniques Grace had taught him. His professors often commented on his creative approaches to assignments and his obvious deep understanding of material. Grace excelled as well, earning a 4.0 in her first semester, while also training new foundation volunteers. The foundation attracted national attention. Education researchers from MIT and Harvard studied the program's methods and outcomes. Major news networks ran features about how peer tutoring and alternative learning approaches were transforming struggling students' lives. Richard Thompson became known not just as a tech billionaire, but as a philanthropist committed to educational innovation. One April afternoon, Blake received an email from Dr. Reynolds. Phillips Academy wanted to host a special celebration for the 1-year anniversary of the Peer Learning Connection. Would Blake and Grace speak at the event? They agreed immediately. Returning to Phillips Academy felt emotional for Blake. Walking through the halls where he had once felt so lost and hopeless, Blake now saw students wearing Peer Learning Connection t-shirts and carrying colorful study materials. The program had become woven into the school's culture. The celebration took place in the school auditorium on a Saturday in late April. Over 300 people attended. Students, parents, teachers, foundation staff, and media representatives. Blake's parents sat in the front row next to Patricia, all three beaming with pride. Dr. Reynolds opened the event by presenting statistics about the program's impact. Then he introduced several students who shared their stories. Chris Peterson, Blake's first tutoring student, explained how the program had saved him from academic failure and helped him discover he was a kinesthetic learner. Sophia Martinez described how Grace's essay organization techniques had transformed her from a struggling writer to someone who loved writing. Hannah Brooks talked about how becoming a peer tutor had given her purpose and helped her turn her dyslexia challenges into a gift for helping others. Each testimony brought tears and applause. Blake sat on stage next to Grace, holding her hand and marveling at what they had created together. These students were not just succeeding academically. They were thriving emotionally, finding community, and discovering their own value. Then Dr. Reynolds invited Blake and Grace to speak. They walked to the microphone together. As they did everything, Grace gestured for Blake to go first. Blake looked out at the audience and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. He had prepared remarks, but in the moment, he decided to speak from his heart. "A year ago, I sat in the library of this school contemplating dropping out," Blake began. "I was convinced I was stupid. I had failed 5 tests in a row despite expensive tutors and every resource money could buy. I felt worthless and hopeless. Then Grace walked into that library and offered me help." Blake paused, his voice getting thick. She did not pity me. She did not judge me. She just saw someone struggling and decided to care. That single act of kindness set everything else in motion. She taught me that I was not broken, just different. She showed me techniques that worked with my brain instead of against it. She gave me hope when I had none. He turned to Grace. "You changed my life. Not just by teaching me how to study, but by showing me that kindness is the most powerful force in the world. Your compassion inspired me to help others. Your generosity motivated my family to create a foundation. Your wisdom taught thousands of students that there are many ways to learn and all are valid." Grace wiped tears from her eyes as Blake continued. "I learned something profound through this journey," Blake said. "Success is not about being the smartest or the richest or the most talented. Success is about community. It is about being willing to accept help when you are struggling and offer help when you can. It is about understanding that we are all different, all valuable, and all deserving of support." Blake gestured to the audience. "Every person in this room has struggled with something. Every person has needed help at some point. The question is, when you see someone else struggling, will you walk by? Or will you stop and offer kindness?" Grace stopped. She offered. And that choice changed thousands of lives. The audience erupted in applause. Blake stepped back, and Grace took the microphone. She looked small standing there, but her voice was clear and strong. "I want to tell you about Mrs. Chen," Grace said. "She was a volunteer teacher at a community center who noticed I was struggling with school. She spent countless hours teaching me for free, expecting nothing in return except the joy of seeing me succeed. When Blake was struggling, I thought about Mrs. Chen. I thought about how her kindness had saved me. I wanted to pass that gift forward." Grace smiled at Blake. "What I did not know was how much helping Blake would also help me. I learned that I love teaching. I discovered that my struggles with learning gave me tools to help others. I found my purpose and my passion. Blake did not just receive help from me. He gave me a gift too, the chance to make a difference." She looked out at the students in the audience. "Every person here has something to offer. You do not have to be rich or famous or perfect to change someone's life. You just have to care. You just have to notice when someone is hurting and decide to help. That is all Mrs. Chen did for me. That is all I did for Blake. That is all any of us can do. See each other, care about each other, help each other." The applause was thunderous. Students stood, cheering and wiping tears. Blake joined Grace at the microphone and they hugged tightly, both crying and laughing at the same time. After the speeches, the celebration continued with refreshments and conversations. Students swarmed Blake and Grace, thanking them and sharing their own success stories. Teachers expressed gratitude for the program. Parents hugged Patricia, thanking her for raising such a compassionate daughter. Blake's former tutor, Mr. Bennett, approached hesitantly. Blake had not seen him since the exam confrontation. "Blake, may I speak with you privately?" Mr. Bennett asked. They stepped into a quiet hallway. Mr. Bennett looked uncomfortable but sincere. "I want to apologize again, properly this time," Mr. Bennett said. "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about the program. I let my ego and insecurity make me question something beautiful. You handled my accusations with grace and dignity that I did not deserve. Thank you for that." Blake studied his former tutor. He could hold on to anger, but what good would that do? "I accept your apology," Blake said. "And I hope you learned something from all this. Not just about different learning styles, but about how we treat people who are struggling. Your doubt hurt me, but it also pushed me to prove myself. Maybe that was necessary. Maybe everything happens for a reason." Mr. Bennett nodded gratefully. I am taking courses on alternative education methods now. I want to be a better teacher. You inspired that change." As Mr. Bennett walked away, Grace appeared at Blake's side. "That was kind of you," she said. "To forgive him." "Holding grudges only hurts the person holding them," Blake said. "You taught me that kindness wins. Even when people hurt us, responding with grace is always the right choice." The celebration wound down as evening approached. Blake and Grace stood together in the now empty auditorium, looking at all the colorful decorations and peer learning connection banners. "Can you believe how far we have come?" Blake asked. "Sometimes it still feels like a dream," Grace admitted. "I am a college student on a full scholarship, working with a foundation that helps thousands of students, speaking at events, training teachers. A year ago, I was just a girl picking up her mom from work." "You were never just anything," Blake said. "You were always someone special. Someone kind and wise and generous. The world just finally noticed." They left Phillips Academy and drove to the Thompson mansion for a family dinner. Richard and Jennifer had invited Patricia and Grace to celebrate the anniversary. The evening was warm and comfortable, filled with laughter and good food. Over dessert, Richard raised his glass. "I want to make a toast to two extraordinary young people. Blake and Grace, you have shown us all what is possible when compassion meets action. You took pain and turned it into purpose. You took struggle and transformed it into strength. You created something that will outlive all of us, helping generations of students who have not even been born yet. I am honored to support your work. More importantly, I am proud to call you my son and proud to consider Grace part of our family." Patricia wiped tears from her eyes. Jennifer held her hand. Blake and Grace looked at each other across the table, their faces reflecting joy and gratitude and hope. Later that night, Blake and Grace sat in his study one more time. The room was filled with memories now. The colorful index cards from their first sessions, photos of students they had helped, awards and certificates from the foundation's work. But it was still fundamentally the same space where Blake had first learned to believe in himself again. "Do you remember the first time we studied in here?" Blake asked. "I was so skeptical. I thought your colorful cards and movement techniques were too simple to work." "I remember," Grace laughed. "You looked at me like I was crazy when I made you walk across the room to learn about derivatives." "Turns out you were not crazy. You were brilliant," Blake said. "Everything you taught me worked. Everything you believed about me came true. You saw potential in me that I could not see in myself." "That is what love does," Grace said simply. "Not romantic love, but the love that sees another person's true self and believes in their best. That kind of love changes people. Mrs. Chen loved me that way. I loved you that way. Now we love thousands of students that way through the foundation." Blake felt peace settle over him. He thought about his journey from despair to hope, from failure to success, from isolation to community. Every step had been guided by Grace, both the person and the concept. "What happens next?" Blake asked. "We are just getting started with college and the foundation. There is so much more to do." "We keep going," Grace said confidently. "We train more tutors. We help more students. We prove that kindness and alternative approaches work. We change how education functions so that no child ever has to feel stupid or hopeless. We build a world where everyone's different way of learning is honored and supported." "That is a big vision," Blake said. "Big visions start with small acts of kindness," Grace reminded him. "One person helping another. Then those two helping others. The ripples spread and spread until they change everything." Blake nodded, understanding deeply. His story had started with one girl deciding to care about one struggling boy. That single act had grown into a foundation, a movement, and a new way of thinking about education. All because someone had chosen compassion over indifference. As Blake prepared for bed that night, he thought about the future with excitement rather than anxiety. He would graduate college. He would continue growing the foundation. He would help tens of thousands of students discover their potential. He would use his privilege and resources to create opportunities for others. But more than any achievement or accomplishment, Blake knew his greatest success was learning to value kindness above all else. To see people who were struggling and offer help. To believe in second chances. To build community rather than walls. to spread hope rather than judgment. Grace had taught him that. Grace had saved him, not just academically, but spiritually and emotionally. She had shown him that one person's compassion could change a life, and that changed life could change many more lives, and those lives could change a community, and that community could change the world. Blake fell asleep feeling grateful, purposeful, and loved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to help others. But tonight, he simply appreciated the incredible journey that had brought him from his lowest point to a life filled with meaning and joy. The story of the billionaire's son and the maid's daughter would be told and retold, inspiring others to show kindness to struggling people in their own lives. It would remind everyone that help can come from unexpected places, that generosity creates ripples of blessing, and that the most powerful force in the world is simple human compassion. Blake Thompson had discovered the secret to learning. But more importantly, he had discovered the secret to living. Kindness wins, hope prevails, and love conquers all.